Thank you so much. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Reverend Krista Taves. I'm privileged to serve as your Minister of Congregational Life, and it is my pleasure to welcome you this morning to Eliot Unitarian Chapel, those of you gathered in this sanctuary and those of you who are joining us remotely. In this congregation, we are people of many ages, many backgrounds, and many beliefs. We are people of diverse orientations, identifications, family structures, and abilities. Our core values are justice, equity, and compassion. We are working for more justice and more love in our own lives and in the world. If you are visiting, a very special welcome to you. I hope that your time with us will be meaningful, that you experience being warmly welcomed, and that we will see you again. For those of you here on site, you should have received a guest form. You are welcome to complete it and put it in the basket during the offertory. If you are a family with children, you're also welcome to fill out the other side, which is for religious education. Then you're welcome to join us for our coffee-less coffee hour after service in Adams Hall. If you're visiting online, we would love to welcome you personally as well. We have a virtual coffee hour. If you sign up for our newsletter, you will get the link to Zoom coffee hour every Sunday morning. And also, please drop us a line at welcome@eliotchapel.org to let us know you're here, and we can welcome you personally that way. One brief announcement before we begin our service. In the order of service, we have the games night listed for this Saturday, February 25th. Unfortunately, that event has been postponed. So please keep an eye out, keep it on your radar. It's just not going to be happening this Saturday. I'd welcome Corinne Esnol, who's going to be our liturgist for today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Corinne Esnol, and I'm a proud member of this congregation, and as Reverend Krista said, the liturgist for this service. In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, we light a chalice to symbolize that we have sacred space and have prepared our minds and spirits for the blessing of a beloved community that happens whenever we gather. And I'll read the poem In the Names of Love by Reverend Scott Taylor. We light this chalice in the names of love, the love of family that brings us into being, allows us to bloom, and then sends us on our way with courage, knowing we can return no matter what. The love of partnered hearts that teach us to trust and help us know that who we are does not matter at the barrier of our own skin. The love of friends who help us feel seen and sing our song back to us when we cannot hear it with our ears alone. The love of community that bathes us in belonging and calls us to see the needs of others as our own. And the greatest love, the love that will not let us go even in our fear, even in our failure, even when we are lonely or lost. Love invites us home. If we listen, it is doing so, even today. Please rise as you are able for our opening hymn, number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath.
Our most answer yes to
As Unitarian Universalists, we are a people of the covenant, living the sacred promises we make to ourselves, our communities, our world. Please join me in reading of our congregational covenant, which is in your order of service. As a free congregation, we promise to one another our mutual trust and support. To create beloved community, we promise to be kinder to each other than we have to be, to listen fully to each other with an open mind and heart, to speak responsibly and respectfully, to find ways to improve our church for all members and friends.
Our wisdom story today is called Mira and the Big Story, and Scott, our Director of Religious Education, is joining me in the telling of this story. It's by Laura Alari, illustrated by Sue Todd. There was once a green valley that lay between two mountains. Through the valley flowed a river, and on each bank of the river stood a village. As long as anyone could remember, the people of the two villages had been enemies. Strange as it seems, it all began with a couple of stories. In both villages, the people loved to tell stories. They told stories to amuse themselves, to teach their children, and to help themselves remember important things. Most important of all were the wonderful tales they told about the beginning.
In the beginning, said the people of one village, there was no valley at all, just flat, rocky plain. When the King of Heaven looked down on the earth and saw people wandering around homeless, he decided to give them a place to live. He sent enormous birds to gather rocks and pile them into mountains. Between the great ridges, the birds scratched and clawed a channel that filled with rainwater and became the river. Finally, one of the birds led the people to their new homeland, and that, declared the villagers, is how our ancestors came to this valley. Now it belongs to us, a gift from the King of Heaven.
In the village across the river, a different story was told. Long ago, said the village folks, the queen of the earth searched high and low for the perfect people to make their home in the valley. When she found them at last, she sent giant turtles to carry the new settlers up the river on their backs. And that, declared the villagers, is how our ancestors came to this valley. Now it belongs to us, a gift from the queen of the earth.
Day after day, year after year, the people of each village told and sang their own stories until they could no longer imagine the beginning of life in the valley any other way. On opposite sides of the river, when the villagers looked across and saw others celebrating a different story of the beginning, they became angry.
That is not how the story goes, they all complained bitterly. This is our valley. It was a gift to us. We belong here. There is no room for others.
In a little yellow house in one of the villages lived a girl named Myra. Like all the children in her village, Myra had grown up hearing stories about the beginning. She knew them by heart. She knew the valley belonged to her people. She knew the others were enemies. She knew they did not belong, but she was very curious about them.
On fine afternoons, Mira often climbed a tree close to the river and watched the people in the other village. Once or twice, when she was feeling especially bold, she even walked far down the bank to a place where the river was narrow and shallow and waded across.
On the other side, everything was strangely familiar. The trees, the wildflowers, the songs of the birds and the insects, the smell of the wind. It was so much like home. Mira looked across the water toward her own village. It felt strange to see it the way others did.
On one of these secret visits, Mira was getting ready to cross back over the river when she fell and cut her foot on a rock. She had scarcely sat down when she heard the rustle of leaves. A small boy scrambled down from the tree where he had been hiding. "Are you hurt?" the boy asked. "Can I help you?" Myra was too surprised to answer. The boy came closer and held out his hand. "Here," he said, "take my arm. Lean on me until you get back across." Together they waded through the water to the other shore.
Who are you?
Mira wanted to know.
Who are you? Where did you come from?
"Where do you think?" the boy answered with a smile. "Do you suppose you are the only one who is curious about the folk on the other side of the river? I watch you the same way you watch us. But you were the first to cross over. That was brave." He looked at Myra admiringly. "I must go now. I hope we meet again." And off he went.
Mira felt jumbled up inside. For the rest of the day, she wondered about the boy. He seemed like an odd piece in a jigsaw puzzle. He was the wrong shape, and she could not make him fit. The others were not supposed to be kind. The others were not supposed to be curious. The others were not supposed to be like her. Could the stories be wrong? There was only one person to whom Mira could bring such a big question.
Old Alfred lived near the river in a stone cottage filled with books. When he was not reading, he was out working in his garden, growing vegetables and herbs from which he made soups and teas and medicines for the people of the village. Children were welcome to come and pick his raspberries. Old Alfred always offered them homemade cookies and a glass of lavender lemonade. He was wise and kind, and his mind and heart were as open as his front door. That very evening, Mira went to see old Alfred. She found him enjoying a pot of tea in the garden. He welcomed her warmly and offered her a cup. When Mira was settled with her tea and cookie, she took a deep breath and said,
Old Alfred, I need your help. I have a big question, and there is no one else I can ask.
Old Alfred put down his teacup. "A big question, you say? I like big questions. It's been a long time since anyone has asked me a good one. Tell me about yours." Mira told old Alfred everything about her secret trips to the other side of the river, about the boy she had met, about how he was like a puzzle piece that did not fit. Old Alfred listened carefully. Then he asked, "So, what is your big question?" In a small voice, Mira said,
Are the stories wrong?
For a few moments, old Alfred stared silently up into the night sky, and then he said, "Mira, let me tell you something about stories. Stories can make you bigger. Not on the outside, of course, but on the inside. They can stretch your mind and heart. But a story can make you smaller if it takes up all the space in your mind and heart. When new people or new ideas come along, there is no room for them. Whenever you hear a story, you must ask yourself, what is this story doing to me? Is it making me bigger or smaller? Our village is dear to me, Mira, but our minds and hearts need to be stretched so we can make room for others." Old Alfred sighed. There will never be peace in this valley until the people of both villages find a story big enough for all of them. Mira felt even more mixed up than before.
I don't understand.
She said,
What kind of story could be big enough for everybody?
"I have a story to share," replied old Alfred, "if you would care to hear it."
I would.
So old Alfred began. "In the beginning, there was nothing, yet there was everything. Do you ever collect chestnuts in the fall, Mira? Imagine holding a chestnut in the palm of your hand. Now imagine something even smaller than that little nut containing everything that exists. It was there, but it was not there yet. The way a bright sunflower is and is not inside the striped seed. the way a song is and is not inside the wooden shell of a violin. Then there was light, not ordinary light like the light of stars or candles or a winter bonfire. This was pure energy, and out of it became unimaginably small bits of matter, the first stuff. Some matter came together and formed stars. Over ages and ages, the stars burned, vast furnaces forging new things deep in their hearts. And when the time came for them to die, the stars exploded. All the stuff inside them was scattered into space. It drifted like dandelion seeds on the wind, ready to start something new. From that stardust came everything: clouds and comets, whales and wildebeests, rattlesnakes and redwood trees,
Emus and elephants, dinosaurs and dragonflies,
pussy willows and plesiosaurs and seahorses and stars. From that stardust came galaxies and solar systems and a little blue planet called Earth. From that stardust came the mountains and the valley and the river and 2 villages. From that stardust came an old man and his garden, and a girl named Mira, and a boy who is still a stranger. We all come from the same place, and we are all made of the same stuff. We are neighbors on this little planet of ours, sailing through the cosmos. Mira felt like her mind and heart were so full they would burst.
If this story is true, then no one owns the valley, and we all belong here. If this is true, the people across the river are not others. They are like us. If this story is true, we are all connected to each other and to everything else: the river, the trees, the sky, the ocean, the animals. If the story is true, we have wasted too much time being enemies.
Mira began to cry, and old Alfred said gently, "Mira, tell me what is in your heart."
What about the stories? What about the birds who led us to the valley? What about the King of Heaven? What about our gift?
"Dear child," answered old Alfred, "you asked me a big question. Now I will ask you some. Who dreamed everything when there was nothing? Whose hand held that little chestnut? Who first lit the stars? Who opened the heart of that little boy to be kind to his enemy? Who opened your mind to see him as someone like you? Who made you so wonderfully curious, Mira? You have not lost your gift or the one who gave it. Both are just so much greater than you ever dreamed." Old Alfred handed Mira a large handkerchief to dry her tears, and when she was calm, he asked, "So, my dear, what do you think of the story? What does it do to you?" Mira pictured the face of the boy across the river. She wanted to find him again and learn his name. Maybe they would become friends. Maybe other children would cross the river. Maybe some grown-ups would come too. Mira felt bigger inside.
I like your story.
She replied with a moonlit smile.
I think it is big enough for everyone.
"Well then," said old Alfred, "perhaps you can share the story with someone else."
I will.
Promised Mira, getting up from her chair.
I already know where to start.
"I thought you might," smiled old Alfred. "Now get yourself home to bed."
But old Alfred,
answered Mira, stretching out her arms to take in the whole valley and the sky above.
I already am home.
Then Mira headed out into the starry night. And that is the end of the story. Let us sing out our children to their classes. Our prayer this morning is called Love Prayer by Reverend Mark Bellatini. And I invite you to join me in prayer or meditation as you are willing and able. Love, you are as strong as a dark blue mountain. Love, you are as fluid as a wide silver river. Love, you are as splendid as a clear night sky. Love, you are as wise as enduring friendship. Love, you are as mysterious as a dark forest. You are true power, not mere distraction. Truth, not deceit. Purpose, not impulse. Poetry, not proses. Sing, not sang. Now, more than tomorrow, but tomorrow more than yesterday, love, condense yourself into this moment. Let us enter into a time of silence for the prayers of our hearts. Let us speak the names of those we would hold in prayer. Love, permeate the silence that joins us in community, so that in the fire of the words to come, the promises of this hour might be sealed in peace. Amen, and blessed be. I invite you to stay seated for our meditative hymn, Building Bridges. Number 1023 in the Teal hymnal.
As a way to familiarize ourselves with it or learn it for the first time, after which we
It is a tradition of this congregation to tithe half of our weekly collection to an organization in the community that does the faithful work of serving the most vulnerable. This month, we are supporting Metropolitan Congregations United, of which we are a member. MCU focuses on justice and equity in our region. We have partnered with MCU to protect voting rights, advocate for clean drinking water in all our schools, and the school-to-prison pipeline that plagues our African American communities, and so much more. MCU has made a difference in so many lives. Let us be a generous people, and if you're streaming, going online, please go to our website and click Giving. There may also be a QR code on the screen that will take you there quickly. Will the ushers please come forward to take the offering? That was exquisite. Thank you. And would the ushers please come forward with the offering? And please join me in the dedication of our offering, which is printed in your order of service. To the work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Thank you. Our reading this morning is Chords of Ripening Wisdom by Reverend Marta Valentin. It's for Audre Lorde, Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza, and Rita Nakashima Brock. The first question, at least for today, is how do I construct a theology with a truth-filled history? Audrey tells me that I cannot dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. To attempt to uncover who my God is with tools designed to exclude me is to pretend that I am blind while born with perfect sight, is to forsake self-understanding that I might see like others. Elizabeth tells me to use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house, but without a manual, I can spend a lifetime barreling through the front door with a log, simply because it's there. Yet I know that same log can only break down back doors to ensure my survival. No more. In search of wholeness, I wonder if the answer is to use new tools to create a new house. Or do we get rid of the house by getting rid of the tools? It is clear that the master must go, but should a mistress move in? My answer lies in Rita's tribal consciousness of self-understanding, survival, wholeness. In creating, building, discovering out of this world's cacophonous madness, I can be guided through a self-governing tribe of voices that crescendo into chords of ripening wisdom, each with their own melody. I can have a center, a flexible observer who can listen beyond hearing, reflect beyond seeing, choose beyond settling, and in this way constantly reconstruct meaning.
Excuse me. This was sliding down on that. That was wonderful. Well done. Well done. One of the words you hear a lot in Unitarian Universalist settings is the word wholeness. We yearn to be spiritually whole, whole in our minds and hearts, whole in our relationships. We also yearn for community wholeness, a sense that everything is in balance. Our relationships, humanity itself, the earth, economic systems, cultural systems, political systems, the place of faith, our private and public lives. And I could go on in all the ways that we search for wholeness. We search for that wholeness often in the big stories that we tell, that tell us who we are and where we belong. Big stories like the one in our Time for All Ages this morning. We all tell those stories. Another theological idea that you will hear often in Unitarian Universalism is the idea that the revelation is continuous. It is not held in a book or one person's legacy or one institution or one God or higher power. Revelation doesn't ever stop. We are the bearers of revelation in the living of our lives. New truths develop through the everyday choices we make and the big choices we make together and individually. So this also means that our big stories don't stop evolving. Otherwise, they become small stories like creeds and doctrines. Small stories that can't hold what real people are living in the real world. Small stories keep us from becoming more whole. Here's an example of two different big stories that are also small stories. So here in the United States, many of you learned, we all learned, I was Canadian, but I learned it in Canada as well, about the American Revolution, the War of Independence. Big, big story, right? Defining story of this country. What does it bring to mind? We learned the story of brave people who wanted freedom from an oppressive monarch, people who were done being lowly colonists. They wanted to make decisions for themselves, govern themselves without interference, and they were willing to die for it. Families who can trace an ancestor back to the Revolution will express great pride that they would come from such an illustrious history. But then there were those who didn't want to join that dream, who wanted to stay with Great Britain. They may have even joined the British Army, and many of them left for British North America when independence was won. What does the American story call these people? What were they called? Traitors, right? They were called traitors to the story of America. They didn't want to join the American story. Do you know what those traitors were called in British North America, which became Canada, where many of them fled to? One of the stories of Canada is that we remained faithful to Great Britain. Those who refused to join the American story, who chose to remain inside the story of Great Britain, we call them loyalists. And they are celebrated. The loyalists settled mostly in what would become Ontario, the province that I'm from. So I was surrounded by families who descended from the loyalists, and they speak with the same pride as those who have descendants that participated in the American Revolution. They're so proud of it. In our culture, they are heroes. They even have their own official holiday. These are two very different big stories that are also small stories taken in a larger context. You have the story of the people who fought for their freedom, the story of the people who remained faithful. Neither story is big enough to hold both countries. Now, there are certainly ways that we share stories that have been revealed over time. We are now peaceful neighbors, each other's largest trading partners. Well, for Canada, the U.S. is our largest trading partner. We share a language. We're both democracies. We watch the same movies and television. We've been deeply shaped by globalization and so much more. But some of our big stories still don't fit together, and for each side, too much of what is treasured would have to be given up to blend those stories entirely. Too much. In our wisdom story today, we heard about two other big stories that weren't big enough for the people on both sides of the river. In the girl Mira, we have this microcosm of human feelings as she dares to step into the land of another story, dares to question her story, feels tremendous grief and guilt over her beloved story as she realizes that it is too small. And then after that inner turmoil, steps into a newer, bigger story and a new, more whole life where revelation continues and continues and continues. Unitarian Universalism is living that story right now. We are looking at the stories that we have believed about ourselves, looking at what has been revealed about our faith tradition in the 21st century, and asking whether the stories we've told ourselves for decades, even centuries, are big enough for all of us to thrive and be nourished. One of the stories we are looking at is our principles and sources, which are at the very beginning of the gray hymnal. If you're new to Unitarian Universalism, if you're watching online, it's a simple Google search. UU 7 Principles. It's all over the web. We're asking whether these principles and sources are still big enough to hold who we are and what we are called to do and be for each other and for the world in the 21st century. And this is a delicate but powerful process because for many of us, me included, the principles and sources are the center of our faith. When I became a Unitarian Universalist in 1997, you could get this red bookmark. I don't know if you remember the red bookmark that had the 7 principles. I got 3 copies so I could have one at home, one in my knapsack to go to school, and one in my wallet at all times. And I would pull that out. It was tattered. I held onto it for years, more than a decade, this ratty little red bookmark, because it meant so much to me. So when we talk about the bigger story, this big story we've been telling using our 7 principles, it's tender, with lots of feelings going on, almost as one might grieve upon losing a creed. 3 super big things have happened in the last decade that revealed a need to reconsider whether our principles and sources are still big enough to hold all of us. The first super big thing was the murder of Michael Brown, whose tragic ending became a spark that lit the Black Lives Matter movement, which is now the 3rd civil rights movement. And it has changed the landscape of our country with growing voices of all races organizing to end the legacy of slavery and systemic racism that still stains this country. The second super big thing is the backlash to the 3rd civil rights movement, resulting in the election of Donald Trump to the presidency in 2017. Those were extremely hard years for many because so much of what he did violated our deepest convictions. He opened the door wide to a renewed, reactionary, white Christian nationalism, nourished by racial grievance and resentment. And white Christian nationalists are doing everything they can, including dismantling our democracy, to stop the shift of power as our country becomes less white, more pluralist, and culturally more liberal and open. The third super big thing is that the unrest around us led to a time of soul searching within Unitarian Universalism. When all hell broke loose in Ferguson, we desperately wanted to step up our game and respond to the hatred and division stoked by white Christian nationalism. But people of color and Indigenous and queer Unitarian Universalists and many others said that we had our own work to do, and if we didn't do that work, we wouldn't make the difference we wanted to make in our time. Our faith, they said, wasn't big enough. Too many people had to give up a part of who they are to join Unitarian Universalism. To use the words of Marta Valentin in her poem, we have to come in the back door. And that's not what we say we are. We say we welcome everyone, that we embrace diversity, but in many ways, we don't. If we as a whole want to be the good guys, we have to clean up our house, which is deeply shaped by white middle-class expectations and understandings, which in my opinion hurts not only the people who are pushed to the margins, it also hurts those who get to live in Unitarian Universalism more comfortably, because it holds us back from the wholeness that we are yearning for. It holds us back from embracing the truth we have professed, that the revelation is not continuous. It is continuous, I'm sorry. The revelation is continuous. It is not sealed. It is ever going. In the bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association, the section where the principles and sources appear must be reviewed every 10 years to see if they are still a big enough story. Because you know that conviction that we have, that the revelation is continuous. We built that right into our core documents. We expect things to change, and we expect ourselves to change along with them. Did you know, for instance, that our principles and sources have only existed since 1985? They replaced the principles and purposes approved in 1961 when the Unitarians and Universalists merged into Unitarian Universalism. The 1961 principles became too small because of the women's movement and the environmental movement and the peace movement and the anti-war movement. And there began to be this percolating, this pushing from within until in 1985, with a lot of conflict and a lot of difficulty and a lot of pain and sorrow, but also a lot of vision, we adopted the 1985 principles and sources. And it's been 40 years since that time. And today we have the third civil rights movement, the growing power of white Christian nationalism, the call from within our faith to clean up our house, the responsibility to assess our principles and sources to remain faithful to the people we proclaim ourselves to be. And that deep yearning for wholeness as so much changes around us, much of which feels destabilizing and wholeness and overwhelming, that deep yearning for wholeness is what is moving us in the direction of creating a bigger story. We need a bigger story. So in 2020, General Assembly delegates, of which there were people from this congregation serving as delegates, a General Assembly voted to set up a commission to rewrite Article 2. That's the section where the principles and sources live. They asked the commission not to start with the principles and purposes and amend them. So not to start with the master's tools to build a new house, but to start with a new model, carrying the legacy of the earlier one. The commission spent the last 2 years talking to thousands of people, and they have rewritten our principles and sources, which they are proposing as our values and our covenant. You know, these 7 principles, there's all kinds of values within them, but they're not stated. We have to lift the values out of them. And so the commission said, let's make the values front and center and embed our principles within these values. And then let's see what happens. So this new revision has been released. It will be debated among a gathering of delegates, of some whom 10 of our members will serve as delegates at General Assembly, where the revisions will be put forward and voted on. And then to recommend that revision for a final vote at General Assembly 2024. So we still have a year and a half of this process, which is already 2.5 years old. So in your orders of service, you have the draft revision. It's just part of it. It's one section of Article 2. And we're going to be going through that together, so don't worry about reading ahead. We're going to be going through it together, right? And because it's such a big change, the Commission actually has developed a process for how they're encouraging us to approach this revision, given how tenderly many of us have taken the 7 principles and sources to heart. They have asked us to approach this revision first with our hearts, then read it again with our curious and connecting brains, and only when you reread it the 3rd time to begin to consider what we like and what changes we would recommend. So not go deep dive and say, I want this change, this change, this change, this change, this changed, which a lot of us can do very easily, right? It's like, oh my gosh, it's so long. Make it shorter. It is long, right? But to instead open our hearts to receive it first before we choose what our response will be to it. So today, let's assume that this is our first read. For many of you, it is your first read. For some of us, it's not. We've been reading it for a while, trying to figure out what we think about it. But let's together assume that we are listening first and foremost with our hearts, which means being in a place of love and openness. So here goes. Let's approach these values and covenants with our hearts. And I want you to first look at the graphic. All right? Let's look at this graphic. What's the center of our new value statement is love. Love is the center, which makes sense because we've been talking about this for a long time. You know, our social justice arm was first called Standing on the Side of Love. Then we realized it was ableist, so we called it the Siding with Love. We side with love. We say love always wins. We say love is the most powerful thing there is. We say it just about every Sunday. So, yep, it is smack dab in the middle. Love is the center. Then we have interdependence at the top, which is different because now we have our individual selves at top of principle 1, right? The interdependent web of all existence is now number 1. It's up top, followed by equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and justice. That's like the quick, short, and dirty version is this graphic, which I now carry in my purse so I can keep looking at it, figuring out what I feel about it. So here I'm going to read through the text, which you also have with you, but some of us learn through our ears and some of us learn through our eyes, so we're going to do them both. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. So you see in here there's references to our sources. We draw from our heritages, and that comes up over and over again. The sources are embedded in our values. So then there's love. And you'll see there's always 2 sections. There's the first statement about love, and then there's our covenant. There's an action associated with every value. That's not the case in our principles and sources. We now have the value and the promise we make for how we're going to act on that value in the world and in ourselves. So love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. See? Right up top. We covenant to cherish earth and all beings by creating and nurturing relationships of care and respect. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great web of life, and we work to repair harm and damaged relationships. Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. There's another principle embedded there. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. Justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of the inclusive democratic process to make decisions. Transformation. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. And finally, equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent worth and dignity. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. So these are our proposed values and covenants. In this new version, principles are replaced by values, and each value is informed by a covenant or a sacred promise we make to each other about how we will live that value. And as you will notice, our current principles and sources are deeply embedded within this new version. So we're both using new tools and old tools to move forward. But it is very different. It's very different. And there are many of us across the country who are like Mira after she returned from the other village and are really struggling with what it would mean to make our story bigger like this. We are being tested by our conviction that the revelation is continuous. But one thing will remain the same, which is that love is the center of our faith. Our current principles and sources implied this. Now it is explicitly front and center. Love is the center of everything we do. Love for ourselves, love for our people and our communities, love for our country, and love for the wide world and all that is in it. These values and covenants clarify how powerful love is and what love can look like in a much bigger story. And that's what I want us to hold on to this morning, that this love is the center. And this isn't the last time we're going to give time to these values and covenants. Reverend Doug's going to focus on them in future sermons. And also, I've got this course called the UU Crash Course Series, just enough information to make you dangerous. Okay? In April, we're focusing on this new version of these covenants and values. And I would also strongly encourage you to read the entire Article 2 report, and the link is in your orders of service, because it tells the whole story of how the idea started, that we had to do this, the decisions that were made, how they were made, who was on the commission, what they considered, who they spoke to, and how they came to write these. It's very, very helpful to understand the context. It really, really helped me. So in the days to come, let us keep our hearts and minds open, and let us love one another. Amen, and blessed be. I invite you to rise as you are able, in body or spirit, for the fire of commitment. closing words are The Force of Truth by Ma Teresa Tet Gustillo Gallardo. Truth manifests itself with its own force. Let us ride on the power of its revelation with a heart ready to receive, to forgive, and to learn. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please be seated for our final musical gift. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Your presence is a blessing to all of us. Go in peace.